You can give without loving, but you cannot love without giving. I want to start us off today by really looking at this profoundly beautiful quote. It perfectly captures the driving philosophy behind a woman who spent 55 years changing the lives of vulnerable children. It's such a simple sentence on the surface, right? But as we're going to see, actually living it out demanded just an extraordinary level of personal sacrifice.
Welcome, everyone. Today's explainer dives into the truly captivating story of Amy Carmichael. She was an Irish missionary who transformed her own personal convictions into a lasting sanctuary in India. She didn't just visit a place to, help out for a bit. She gave her entire adult life to it and completely redefined what it meant to serve others along the way.
Okay, so let's dive right into this journey. We're going to track her life through 6 key stages today. We'll look at her early life and calling, her immersion in India, her work rescuing vulnerable children, the creation of the Dohnavur Fellowship, how she wrote through immense suffering, and finally, her lasting legacy.
All right, Part 1, Early Life and Calling. The journey begins. Let's look at the environment that nurtured her lifelong dedication to the disadvantaged.
Amy Beatrice Carmichael was born way back on December 16, 1867, in Millsile, Ireland. And growing up in a deeply devout Christian family, a young Amy didn't just read about compassion, she actually went out and acted on it. Early on, she completely broke social norms by organizing Bible classes for factory workers and dedicating her youth to caring for the poor right in her local community. She just had this innate, relentless drive to help those on the margins, literally right from the start.
But her path to finding her true calling, well, it was a pretty global journey. Born in Ireland, she first traveled overseas as a missionary to Japan in 1893. Now, illness unfortunately cut that trip short, and she spent a brief time recovering in Sri Lanka, which was known as Ceylon at the time. But she sensed she was meant for something else entirely, and she eventually arrived in southern India in 1895. And that place would become her permanent home.
Which brings us to Part 2, Immersed in India, Breaking Boundaries. Because once she got to southern India, she quickly proved she wasn't going to be your conventional missionary.
This is a really fascinating comparison. Look at the sheer contrast here. The standard 19th century missionary approach generally involved living totally separate from the locals and focusing almost entirely on preaching. But Amy, she completely threw out that playbook. She completely immersed herself in the culture. She wore traditional Indian clothing, she put in the work to learn the local languages, and she traveled deep into the villages to build genuine trust through real, practical, everyday compassion.
And that approach stemmed from a really firm belief. Just read this quote: "If I belittle those whom I am called to serve, I know nothing of Calvary love." She believed that you absolutely had to understand and deeply respect the people you were serving. You had to demonstrate love through your daily actions, not just stand far away at a distance and use words.
That deep integration leads us right into Part 3, Rescuing Vulnerable Children, a Secret Sanctuary.
Living so closely among the people, Amy became exposed to a really devastating reality: the severe exploitation and abuse of children. She was specifically drawn to the horrific plight of young girls who were in danger of being dedicated to temples, where they faced just unimaginable abuse. Driven by this unshakable belief that every single child deserved dignity, she couldn't just stand by. So, taking on immense personal risk, she actually began secretly rescuing these vulnerable girls, giving them a safe place to hide, live, and grow.
But as the number of rescued children kept growing, her secret operation eventually had to evolve. Let's look at Part 4, the Dohnavur Fellowship, a family, not an institution.
To support these kids, she founded the Dohnavur Fellowship to provide true, holistic care. And we aren't just talking about a bed and some food. She provided comprehensive care, shelter, rigorous education, top-notch medical care, Christian teaching, and above all else, fierce love and protection. She was very intentional about designing Dohnavur to feel like a warm, supportive family rather than a cold, clinical orphanage. It eventually grew to care for hundreds of children, even developing its own schools and agricultural work so the ministry could sustain itself.
Now, a life of such intense physical labor takes a heavy toll, which brings us to Part 5, Writing Through Suffering, Finding Purpose in Pain.
In 1931, everything changed. Amy suffered a really serious fall that left her largely confined to bed for many, many years. Now, you'd probably think an injury that severe would spell the end of her mission, right? But she absolutely refused to stop leading. While the injury ended her physical travels, she just pivoted. she shifted her focus entirely to prayer, continuously encouraging her staff, and writing.
And get this, 30. She wrote more than 30 books during her time in India. Just think about that for a second. She completely transformed years of intense physical confinement and pain into what became her most prolific, impactful era as an author.
She viewed her suffering as an opportunity to trust God even more deeply, penning absolute classic devotional works like If, Gold Cord, Things as They Are, and Edges of His Ways. These books reflect so deeply on prayer, discipleship, and sacrifice, and honestly, they continue to challenge readers all over the world to a life of wholehearted dedication, effectively expanding her ministry far beyond the borders of India.
Let's move to our final section and see how all of this builds into an impact that outlasted her lifetime. Part 6, A Lasting Legacy, Refreshment and Inspiration.
55. That is just a staggering number to me. She lived and served in India for more than 55 years. Once she arrived there in 1895, she never once returned to her homeland in Ireland. Not a single time. She deliberately chose to spend her entire adult life fully, completely engaged with the people she loved.
And I think this bold statement from her underlines her unwavering commitment better than anything else. She said, "Missionary life is simply a chance to die." It's an incredibly intense thing to say, but it perfectly summarizes her absolute dedication to selfless, sacrificial service. For Amy, giving her life meant pouring herself out completely for others, literally until her very last breath.
When she finally passed away, she explicitly requested no large monument. So instead, a simple bird bath marks her resting place. It's a beautifully poignant final touch, isn't it? This simple bird bath perfectly captures how she offered life, hope, and spiritual refreshment to hundreds of vulnerable children. She wanted the focus to remain purely on giving life, even in death.
Today, her enduring impact really stands on 3 massive pillars. First, the Dohnavur Fellowship, which actually continues its ministry to this very day. Second, her amazing library of over 30 enduring devotional classics. And third, her role as a global model for child protection ministries. She essentially created a modern blueprint for courage and compassion.
As we wrap up today's explainer, I really want to leave you with this question. How can a life of simple, sacrificial service change the world? Think about that for a bit. How might Amy Carmichael's extraordinary example, her profound compassion, and her just courageous love inspire the way that we serve others today? I really hope her story challenges you to look at how you can give to the people around you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.